Hi, I'm Michaela Barnyard. This is Smash Course History, and today we'll be talking about a significant event that significantly impacted the Civil Rights Movement, the Selma to Montgomery March. Why Selma, Alabama? Well, this is Alabama during the 60s, so do I really need to explain? Ooh, Miss Barnyard. Was Alabama really that bad? I mean, I did grow up in Alabama, so Alabama's not that far behind mainstream U.S. culture, right? Well past me. Okay, who am I kidding? I'm only 5 years behind you. You're like, what, 17? So technically you're still growing up in Alabama. I don't like Alabama now, so I probably won't like it later, right? I don't think our age difference is large enough to pull this bit off, huh? Not particularly. Well, alright then, moving on. And a little advice, don't buy your glasses from the senior section at Costco anymore. Just don't. Anyway, to answer past me's question, even though the Civil Rights Act of 1964 forbade the denying of voting rights based on racial discrimination, local and state governments in Alabama often opposed the registration of black voters. Between 1961 and 1965, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as the SNCC, had led a voting registration campaign in Selma in Dallas County, Alabama. On January 2, 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, also known as the SCLC, had joined the SNCC as well as the Dallas County Voters League and other local African Americans who were in the campaign in Selma, where despite various registration attempts by local blacks, only 2% were on the voting rolls. Here is a historical tape of an actual interrogation with David Wallace, the governor of Alabama during this time, talking about his support for racial segregation. Steve, roll the clip.
I will not allow African Americans to enroll in the University of Alabama. Whites and colors have lived for generations in the South in peace and equanimity.
Get off the stage. You suck.
They each prefer their own pattern of society, their own churches, and their own schools, which history and experience have proven are best for both races. So I say, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
You suck.
The SCLC decided to focus its efforts specifically in Selma because they anticipated that the notorious brutality of the local law enforcement under Jim Clark would attract national attention and pressure President Lyndon B. Johnson and Congress to enact new national voting rights legislation. The SCLC also hoped to use the momentum from the 1964 Civil Rights Act to win federal protection for a new voting rights statute. The campaign in Selma and nearby Marion, Alabama had progressed with mass arrests but little violence for the first month. That changed in February, however, when police attacks against nonviolent protesters increased. During January and February of 1965, King and the SCLC had led a series of demonstrations to the Dallas County Courthouse. On the night of February 18th, Alabama state troopers joined local police in breaking up an evening march in Marion. In the ensuing melee, however, a state trooper shot Jimmy Lee Jackson, a 26-year-old church deacon from Marion, who was attempting to protect his mother from a trooper's nightstick. 8 days later, he died in the Selma hospital. In response, a protest march from Selma to Montgomery was scheduled for March 7th. Here's a tape with an interrogation of Sweet Peaches, a local in Marion, Alabama at the time after Jimmy Lee Jackson was shot.
My name is Sweet. Wait a minute. This is going to be anonymous, right?
Yeah, right. Put in the filter.
Huh. My name is Sweet Peaches. I'm from Hazel Green, Alabama. I was a part of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that was led by the one and only Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself. I participated in the march from Selma to Montgomery, and that march was terrifying, but yet it was a symbol of bravery. I remember everything about it, from losing our own dearly innocent children, such as the young Jimmy Lee Jackson, who was 26 at the time, defending his mother from a policeman. While he was defending his mother, he was shot by a police officer. "8 days later, he died."
The Selma to Montgomery March encompassed 3 weeks and 3 events that represented the political and emotional peak of the modern civil rights movement. The first event is known today as Bloody Sunday. On March 7, 1965, about 600 civil rights marchers headed east out of Selma on U.S. Route 80. While King was in Atlanta, his SCLC colleague Hosea Williams and SNCC leader John Lewis led the march. The marchers made their way through Selma until they hit a blockade of state troopers and local lawmen, commanded by Jim Clark and Major John Cloud, who ordered them to disperse. When they did not, he ordered his men to advance. Cheered on by white onlookers, the troops attacked the crowd with clubs and tear gas. Mounted police chased retreating marchers and continued to beat them until driving them back to Selma, ultimately hospitalizing over 50 people. Bloody Sunday was televised around the world. When members of Congress pressured King to restrain the march until a court could decide whether or not the protesters deserved federal protection, he felt torn between their request for patience and the Selma activists' demands for change and action. Oh, time for the mystery document.
I know you are asking today, how long will it take? Somebody's asking, how long will prejudice blind the visions of men, darken their understanding, and drive bright-eyed wisdom from her sacred throne? Somebody's asking, when will wounded justice lying prostrate on the streets of Selma and Birmingham and commuters all over the South be lifted from this dust of shame to reign supreme among the children of men? Somebody's asking, when will the radiant star of hope be plunged against the nocturnal bosom of this lonely night, plucked from the weary souls with chains of fear and the manacles of death? How long will justice be crucified and truth bear it?
Okay, well, I know that he's anti-segregation, and he did talk about Birmingham, so I'm gonna guess Martin Luther King Jr.?
That's
Yes! In the second event, King, still feeling conflicted, led a symbolic march on March 9th, but he turned it around at the same bridge that the first march ended on, which was the Edmunds Pettus Bridge. His actions showed the tensions between the SCLC and the more militant SNCC, who pushed for more radical tactics that would go from nonviolent protest to win reform to active opposition to racial institutions. Federal District Judge Frank M. Johnson weighed the right of mobility against the right of protest and ruled in favor of the demonstrators. Judge Johnson stated, "The law is clear that the right to petition one's government for the redress of grievances may be exercised in large groups, and these rights may be exercised by marching, even along public highways." The third event took place on March 21st when about 3,200 people set out for Montgomery with federal protection, walking 12 miles a day and sleeping in fields. By March 25th, King had led thousands of nonviolent demonstrators to the Alabama Capitol after a 5-day, 54-mile march, amassing to 25,000 people. 3,200 to 25,000? That's a lot of people! Less than 5 months after the 3 marches, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the best possible redress of grievances. But Bloody Sunday was not just about the winning of a federal act. It highlighted the political pressures that King was negotiating at the time, between movement radicalism and the federal calls for restraint, as well as the tensions between the SCLC and the SNCC. Along with the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act was one of the most expansive pieces of civil rights legislation in American history. Its effects greatly reduced the inequality between black and white voters in America and allowed for more African Americans to join political life at the local, state, and national levels. Thank you for watching. Until next time. Smash Course was made with the help of these people and would not have been possible without my high school history teacher, Mrs. Heron. These are our sources. Feel free to access them in the thingamajig below. My name is Michaela, and as John and Hank Green like to say, don't forget to be awesome.